All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Andrews. I'm the director at LakewoodAlive. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. This is a forum, as you know, Madison on the move. There are some wonderful things happening on Madison Avenue. We're here tonight to have a conversation, to talk about what's coming, what's working, maybe what's not, and what we can do to really improve this extremely unique corridor. It's a great street, and I'm really excited for the future. And I appreciate you being here and being a part of this. Thanks to our partners at the City of Lakewood for helping us out with this forum, and you're going to hear a presentation from Director Siley and also Planner Jason Russell. We appreciate Lakewood City Schools for allowing us to use this space, Lakewood Public Library for putting on the audio-visual and for recording this presentation, and our partners at the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce. You met Patty. She was sitting at the table, so thank you for helping check people in. Briefly, we are a nonprofit economic development organization. We are about 10 years old, and we're a small staff of 3. We're really volunteer-driven. We're here to grow the local economy and improve the community's quality of life. That's really what it's about. Now, our main focus we have 2 different sides of the equation. On the commercial side, our main focus is the Main Street program. That's working in downtown Lakewood on Detroit between Bunce and Arthur, putting on large-scale events like Light Up Lakewood, which is coming up this Saturday. Design services, where we're actually working with merchants and building owners to develop conceptual renderings, working with Coffin Park Friends and the City of Lakewood on the Coffin Park Master Plan, Merchant Association, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also have a housing outreach program, which is citywide, and that's where we help a lot of low to moderate income individuals improve the exterior condition of their home. But what we also realize is that there's a lot more to Lakewood, particularly when it comes to the commercial quarters, than just downtown Lakewood. While that's our primary focus, it's not our singular focus. And we want to assist as best we can with our limited capacity in other sections of Lakewood, East End, West End, and Madison Avenue. So in 2013, we've been working with our friends at City Hall and also some volunteer groups. We have put on 2 concerts at Madison Park as kind of a pilot, and we look to expand that in 2014, but we're trying to replicate the front porch concerts that you see at the Lakewood Public Library down here on Madison. Cliffs Natural Resources came out in June, and we partnered with them, and one of many projects they worked on was creating planter boxes. And so I hope you've seen those boxes that are on Madison, running all the way from the car wash to Mahall's and even a little bit beyond. There's 27 of them. In fact, we were just out there, Allison Urbanik, who's our housing outreach director, and Carl Orban, a volunteer, we were out there painting those, getting them ready for the winter. We also, putting on this forum, and then working with our design committee, as I mentioned earlier, to provide conceptual services to property owners, commercial property owners, to help them see what their building can be, and then do that in partnership with our friends at City Hall to get them through the storefront renovation program. You're going to hear more about that tonight. So that being said, I'd like to introduce Director Drew Siley, Planning Development from the City of Lakewood. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Ian, I'm always impressed how you can do that summary of LakewoodAlive in about one breath. They are certainly a small organization, but certainly very mighty. They have a big reach, and they do an amazing amount of work. The events in the downtown have been transformative in many ways for Lakewood, and their volunteer corps is incredible. The folks who turn out to help them in so many different ways are really making a big difference in our community. I'm happy to be here. This is an exciting kickoff to what is going to prove to be a very busy next 2 years for Madison Avenue. You know, what you're going to hear, the kind of main event tonight, what you're going to be hearing from is a group of business owners who have made significant investment on Madison, have relocated their businesses or opened their businesses, or helped refresh a business that has been a longstanding institution, or in the case of the library, has been an institution that's been a staple of Madison Avenue. And they're going to talk about what's on their mind, because this is the beginning of a conversation to where do we go from here. Now, Madison, as you know, there it is. It's 2.6 miles from end to end. It is definitely, as Ian intimated, a unique corridor in that it connects the metro parks on the west end with the rapid transit on the east end. So it's bookended by connections to a larger regional context. It has more of the streetcar suburb buildings per block than Detroit Avenue. It's of a very different scale and character, and there's really a big opportunity, I think, to replicate the successes we've had on Madison, or on Detroit. On Detroit and in Lakewood, you've seen somewhere in the neighborhood of about $80 million in private investment happening along Detroit Avenue over the last several years. And we've seen that investment begin on Madison Avenue, but really one of the drivers that's going to help facilitate that is some major public investment. So just quickly, how many of you here either own a business or work on Madison or live within about a 5-minute walk of Madison Avenue? So lots of us. It's near and dear to your hearts for sure, including me. I live about a little under a mile from here, south of Madison on Athens, so if nothing else, I want to make sure we get a really good coffee shop near my house so I can walk up there. Complete self-interest drives a lot of this. So what we did a few years ago, and oftentimes it's asked, what do you do as planners? Well, in that planning, it's developing a strategy for doing, ultimately. If you do a plan that ends up being nothing but a document that sits on the shelf in my office, that's a major waste of time. What we wanted to create was a strategy to move forward and improve that corridor. And so in 2009 and 2010, with help from Councilwoman Madigan, we were able to secure a grant that allowed us to hire a consulting team, mostly of Lakewood folks, to develop what we called the DNA. So it was the Madison East Plan. And what that said is, through a public input process, what do we want Madison to look like? What do we want the improvements to be? What are the kinds of things that we need to see to define that character and make sure that it's a vibrant commercial corridor for the next 50 years? And so we did that. What that helped us do then is lead from the concept planning to the real planning of how do you design those improvements and how do you attract funding to do those improvements, because there's nothing worse than an unfunded mandate. You have a very good idea, but you can't pay for it or do it. Those things take time, and I'm going to talk about exactly how we got there. So what about Madison? I've heard that question a bunch over the last few years. Detroit's gotten a lot of attention. It's had a lot of investment, both public and private. Well, part of that is market driven. We resurfaced the road in about 2006, 2007. The city put up new decorative signal poles and the traffic signal poles just in the last few years. But what we saw attracted to Madison was a lot of private investment. So we were going to build on that. We were going to go where the money was. We were going to build on what people outside of public dollars were investing, and we had that success. It didn't mean we were ignoring Madison Avenue. It didn't mean we weren't concerned about it or paying attention. It just meant we were working on setting up how do we make Madison successful also, and that's where we are today. So for those of you who might be concerned about that Madison hasn't gotten that attention, we have been thinking about it, and now we're in that doing phase, and here we go. So how do you create a corridor? You know, the myth of things like build it and they will come with public improvements like banners and, brick pavers and planters and all those things, those are niceties, but what you need is a core, a very strong business community. Good, long-standing businesses, new businesses who are willing to invest significant dollars. And we need to work together. It's a partnership between the city, between the nonprofits, and the business owners. And in that collaboration, we can move forward. Coordination is going to be very key in this too, because of the kinds of public improvements we're going to be doing in the next 2 years, there's going to be some serious discomfort for your business. I'm going to get that out on the table now. When we're resurfacing the road in front of the blocks that are in your business, we're going to have to coordinate making sure you have parking so your customers can get to your businesses, making sure that you know when construction projects are going to happen, hearing from you if you have special events or certain weeks or months that need to have good access to your property over and above what you typically do. We need to stay coordinated, stay in good communication. And then really it's this celebration piece, and not just an event, but telling the Madison Avenue story. Telling folks who are interested in investing in Lakewood why Madison is a good opportunity. That's not just us at City Hall. The best economic developers in the community are the business owners. I'm paid to tell people why it's really good to be in Lakewood. I believe it, but I'm also paid to do it. But if you make a referral or recommendation as a business owner to another business owner saying you should try Lakewood, here's why I did it, that has legs and that has significant impact. So what we found is that public investment helps prime the well for additional private investment. We've already seen some private investment, and for many of you it feels like more than some, it's been significant, but we've seen private investment. But this big-time public investment starts to motivate and attract other private investment. So, for example, Detroit Avenue, Lakewood in general, it's no coincidence that in about 2008, we started seeing significant reinvestment and renaissance of our commercial corridor, mostly on Detroit Avenue. Well, what happened before that? You saw the schools, bond issues being passed to reinvest in our school buildings. We're standing in one of those new school buildings right now. You saw the library happen, you saw the YMCA happen, and you saw other public improvements like that resurfacing I mentioned. So we cleaned up and we incentivized folks to say, this is what's important to us in our community. Our incentive to you is, we're investing, we'd love for you to invest, let's work together. So again, the Detroit example, as I just summarized. And then those private dollars coming in afterward. And we're still seeing more and more of that. But for the first time in my time with the city, it's been about 5 years, I've had more and more calls and outreach from developers and business owners who are seriously interested in Madison Avenue. They didn't really look at it before for a bunch of reasons. They didn't understand it necessarily. Detroit was kind of the hot item. They wanted to be in Detroit. Maybe they couldn't find a property. What we're seeing the trend in town is, it's not just people looking for storefronts, they're looking to buy buildings. And Madison is ripe for that. There are plenty of buildings that are maybe underutilized, being generous. The chronic vacancy in some of those units or those buildings, what you'll see is, without fail, the ones that are, for the most part, that are always vacant on the first floor have residential above. We have the same situation on Detroit. Their residential units are occupied. Those owners may have owned it for a long, long time and aren't terribly interested in a retail component. They're making enough money from the residential. And so what happens is that building changes hands and good things happen. And we've seen that with some of the projects on Madison. Madison on the move. That's how we were branding this. We're talking about it just so we can shape a conversation and give some context to it. Because the biggest things you're going to see are these transportation-related improvements in the next 2 years. And so when you talk about it, hashtag it, do whatever you can, it attracts attention to it. This is also about telling our story. We're trying to develop a coordinated message about what we want to achieve as a community for Madison Avenue. So this is the tagline. We're also open to suggestions for revisions to that. If anyone has a better idea, this was our brainchild. We're not married to it, but we can use it for now. Historical context, it was interesting. A Lakewood resident who sits on our Board of Zoning Appeals as his graduate thesis project did an inventory of the balconies on Madison Avenue. And I don't know if you've ever paid attention, but if you go up and down Madison Avenue, you see how many of those balconies, they have, for the most part, iron railings. Some of them have been modified. But the entire corridor has that. And since you have more of those original streetcar suburb buildings, you're seeing that. You start to read it with new eyes. It has this great historical texture to it. Look block by block how many of the buildings that were there 100 years ago are still there. That's important. That's a character-defining feature that makes Madison unique. So you see those items. It's also the only corridor that has Madison Park, which is the second largest park in the city. It's the only commercial district that has a park fronting directly on the street. And that park is incredibly busy. Judy from the library is going to talk to you about the Madison branch and the traffic we see there. The main branch sees about 11,000 visitors a week, I think something like that. I think per square foot, the Madison branch sees even more than that. And it's an amazing resource in the community. You have the library coupled with the park, and then you start to identify these assets. You look at culture and texture and assets, and you start to understand what we can do. The other incredible thing to us, and Jason Russell, who you're going to hear from shortly, was astute enough in his analysis of Madison to realize this, is it truly is a small business corridor. Of the 302 businesses on Madison, 95% are local one-off businesses. There are very few chains or regional or national chains if you start to think about it. It's limited to things like Walgreens and Burger King and some banks and Sherwin-Williams, but for the most part, it's local business. It's also what we're seeing is a corridor that has a lot of interesting professional services and retail service. So it's where you're seeing the architecture firms. You're going to hear from Dave Krebs tonight. AODK relocated to the West End and they did a major renovation on a building. But more and more of those firms are located there. Graphic design firms, interior design firms. It also has that service retail that is from 100 years ago in many ways that you don't see a lot of. It's where you can get your shoes repaired. It's where you can go to the tailor. It has all those kinds of things and the great local bakeries and so on and so forth. So it's celebrating and highlighting those existing assets and how do we support them. The storefront vacancy right now, we just updated that, is about almost 14%. Detroit's single digit right now, it's about 8% total. Madison already is going in a positive direction. About 4 years ago, that was over 20%, that vacancy rate. We've seen about, I think it was 40, more than 40 certificate of occupancies were issued on Madison Avenue in the last year. So it's getting attention already. It's now time to come in and make sure it's great on all fronts. So where do we go from here? So as I mentioned, public and private, significant investment. What we're going to do is, tonight I'm just kind of skimming over the top of these public improvements. The Madison Avenue improvements are big, complicated projects. We're going to come back to you probably in late January and early February and do a series of workshops where we can roll up our sleeves, lay out our maps, show you exactly how the construction is going to happen, what's going to happen when, how the project's going to work, what parking lanes are going to be taken up when, methodology, all of that stuff. That's not tonight, so know that. We'll be back to you. We don't have the schedule completely dialed in yet. We will by then. We'll know exactly where we're going to be. I know there's anxiety. I've heard from business owners. I talk to them, say, what's going to happen when they're resurfacing and I don't have parking? I'm a restaurant. That's a big deal to me. Or I have music lessons today. How are those kids going to get to my shop? We're going to have to work together to figure that out. But we're telling you this 10 months before we put a shovel in the ground so we can work together and plan. And we can have a good strategy to deal with it. But I'll tell you now, there is going to be discomfort. So let's brace for that. And I can tell you now, a contractor is going to cut somebody's gas line. It's going to happen. I apologize in advance for their errant backhoe use. They're going to knock down a tree in front of your business. They might hit a power line, things like that. Let's hope not. But we'll deal with those things. And if we're in good communication now, when those issues come up, we can handle them. We can take care of them. So let's get ready for that. So some of that investment. Madison Park has changed dramatically in the last 5 years for the better, and it's continuing to see investment. New playground equipment, the baseball field's been rehabbed, the walking paths, all of those things. The parking lot on the north end was just resurfaced, bioretention was put in there as well. The skate house in the middle where the bathrooms are, those not so good bathrooms in the middle of the park, that's getting a complete overhaul. Those improvements in total are about $500,000. So what we've seen in the last 5 years is, well over $1 million invested in Madison Park. A big asset, we recognize that. You're seeing that money. We also have gotten better from the lessons learned with Detroit Avenue about how to coordinate these types of improvements. Detroit, you remember we resurfaced 2007-ish. We came back in just in the last couple years and put up the new signal poles. Well, logic would say it would be ideal if you could do all those things at once. But what we've worked hard to do is attract funding from outside the city to pay for those improvements. So the Madison Avenue improvements, for example, are going to be fully funded by Ohio Public Works Commission, Federal Highway Transportation Administration, Cuyahoga County. So those aren't Lakewood dollars necessarily directly. Those are others who are helping us fund. Initially, when we started talking about Madison Avenue, which is about a $2.4 million project to resurface from one end to the other, we thought maybe we would get half of that money from the state and maybe the city would have to match the other half. But with the mayor's leadership, and Mayor Summers is here tonight, our public works director pushed very hard. We got ready with our designs. So as I talked about, we went from concept to plan. And as we've always said, when everyone else is looking for their pencils, we're rolling our drawings out. And that's what we were able to do. So we were able to jump the line several years. Initially, we were booked out until like 2018. To get that money. But because we were prepped, we'll be able to break ground on that project, the resurfacing, a year from now. So in the fall of 2014, you'll see that happening. It's going to be in 4 phases. We're going to work from west to east, and so you'll see some of that on the map, and again, in those future meetings, we'll talk about it. We're also going to do the signals at the same time. So those upgrades to the traffic signals, those new poles are going to happen at the same time. Now, those are 2 different funding pots. Federal money's involved in that. The likelihood of those things kind of coming together is slim. What's your name? Nicole. That would be like Nicole and I deciding we're going to sneeze at the same time to try to get those 2 projects lined up and happen exactly at the same time. But we're able to do that. Now we know we're starting at the west end in the fall of 2014. So at the east end, we're replacing the water main. So we're going to start there, dig up the whole street, working from 117th west. And so we're going to fix all those underground improvements before we surface instead of the other way around, which would be horrible. So it's that kind of coordination, lessons learned. How do you do this stuff in a thoughtful, logical sequence? And so that's where we're going to go. So as I mentioned, the certificates of occupancy. We're also made a concerted effort, and 2013 was a big learning year for us about how to use our city programs and our nonprofit partners with greater effect on Madison Avenue. So we allocated about $300,000 in community development block grant dollars specifically to Madison Avenue to fund storefront renovations. And we started door knocking early in the year. LakewoodAlive was a big help on that, doing outreach, explaining to business owners what kinds of funds are available and how we might be able to partner and what might be helpful. So that grant program is up to 40% rebate on your rehab up to $30,000. So you spend $70,000, it's a grant, you get 30. That's big dollars being leveraged. That helps it go a lot further with what your improvements. And we've seen 9 of those we have in the pipe or have been done in the past year. And you'll see some of those photos are in here too in that photo stream Jason did. Beginning, those businesses that have been improved, a lot of those have received that kind of grant money. We're going to do the same thing next year. We're going to make those funds available. What we've also done with some of our in-house talent and volunteer groups through Lakewood Alive is we're going to do a more directed effort to provide pro bono design services. So if what you're good at is running your law office and not renovating a building, we're going to help you develop a vision to renovate that building. We're going to help connect you to funds. So Mike Malinsky, our city architect, is here. Bryce Sylvester, one of our planners, Jason's here. We've got folks from Lakewood Alive, their design committee's helping. So if you have an idea that's something you want to work on, we can help you shape up that concept. We want to take the hassle factor out of this. We want to knock down those hurdles, because if it seems daunting, I'm going to buy a building, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to hire an architect, I don't know how to talk to those guys, they wear a lot of black clothes, they're strange, you're okay to feel like that. No offense, Mike. How do we help you do that? We're a good resource for that. We understand, and in planning and development, we also we run housing and building. We understand both from the concept to the how do you build it side. We can help you get there on those things. So we want you to understand, we want you to be a resource, or understand we're a resource. We'll stick around, we're around after this meeting too, and we'll be able to answer those questions. We could sit down with you in the next couple of days if you're interested, but get together with us and don't miss that opportunity to work with us. And so what we've calculated between the resurfacing, the signalization project, the Madison Park improvements, the water main improvement, what you're going to see in the next 24 months is about $6 million of public investment in Madison. It is long overdue, but these funds are mostly coming from the outside. We're going to start putting shovels in the ground about 10 months from now. That resurfacing project's going to take about a year. It's going to be in those phases. It's going to start in September, October, and finish up a year later. And we'll work our way through that. Some of the significant pieces to know is that we're going to reconfigure the lanes on Madison. As I'm sure any of you who've traveled on Madison, tried to ride your bike on Madison, opened a car door on Madison, you know the lanes are extremely narrow. We're going to change it to a single travel lane in each direction. We developed that with a lot of public input when we developed the Madison East plan. Center turn lane, keep all the parking lanes, and we're going to be adding bike infrastructure too. So we're looking at probably where it can handle it, which is quite a bit, probably bike lanes. On the east end where it's more narrow, we're going to do sharrows down there, but you're going to see those kinds of things happening. So, as I said, we're going to be back to you in a couple months. We're going to sit down and go through it in great detail. We're going to talk about timeline. We're going to talk about pain and suffering and how we're going to get through this together. But I look forward to working with all of you, and I really look forward to hearing from this panel, because these guys are in the front row literally every single day on Madison Avenue, and they're going to share their thoughts and hopes and dreams. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Drew. And as Drew mentioned, we appreciate that Mayor Summers is here and Councilwoman Madigan. Thank you for being here as well. So we appreciate your leadership from both of you. Next, I'd like to introduce Jason Russell to go through his presentation. He's a city planner.
Good evening. Raise this up a little bit. There we go. Thanks. You could have moved it up, Ian. Good evening. My name is Jason Russell. I'm a city planner with the city of Lakewood. I've been a planner in Lakewood since April, so I'm relatively new to the community of Lakewood, but I've been very well embraced here, and I'm very happy to be working on Madison Avenue, more specifically with some of the projects that I've been working on. Tonight we're going to have a panelist of individuals that are very committed to Madison, who are a part of the institutions and anchors on Madison Avenue, and we're going to hear from them about their experiences and why they've chose Madison, why they stick with Madison, why they continue to invest on Madison Avenue. So if you guys could come up individually, and I'll introduce you, and we'll get started. All right, Bob, I'm going to start with you. I'm just going to have you guys go down the row and introduce yourself, just your name, your business, how long you've been either a Lakewood resident or owned your business on Madison Avenue. So,
all right, my name is Bob Wright. I don't know if I need this or not.
Yes.
I own the Buckeye Beer Engine on Arthur and Madison. It will be 7 years in March, which is really hard to believe. It went that fast. I'm also really representing not only the beer engine and owner, but also the Uptown Lakewood group that I can talk about if you want me to run.
All right, I've got a question for you.
Thank you.
I'm David Krebs. My company's AODK, and we purchased the building about 4 years ago or so. I live in Lakewood now for about 20 years with my family, and so we're ready for the very west end.
Good evening. I'm Maria Shinn, and I'm an attorney here in Lakewood. I lived in Lakewood for 16 years, and I bought my building 2 years ago. And I'm the one that all the chamber and the LakewoodAlive meetings say, what about Madison? What about Madison? What's going on with Madison? I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking.
Okay. My name is Judy Grzybowski. I'm the branch manager of the Madison Library. I've been at the Madison Library now for 24 years. I've been a Lakewood resident for 36 years, and I live at the east end of Lakewood.
Hello, everybody. I'm Colin McEwen. I co-own Mahall's 20 Lanes with my wife and her family. We've lived in Lakewood for about 6 years, and we bought Mahall's coming up on 2 years ago in December. That's all I got.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I have a few prescribed questions, but we want to make this more of conversational. So if I do a direct question to Bob, Maria, or Judy, or Colin, feel free to step in and provide your own feedback as well. And then we're going to open it up to you guys, too, for your questions you may have for the panelists. So, Bob, I'll start with you. You mentioned Uptown Madison. If anyone's driven down Madison during the Halloween season, you saw the scarecrows taped on all the poles, and then now there's the candy cane, sort of the theme now. So Uptown Madison's a business association from Hilliard and between Hilliard and Warren on Madison. So, Bob, can you talk a little bit about Uptown Madison, and is that something you see could be replicated on other sections of the Madison corridor?
Yeah, the idea is starting uptown Madison in a smaller area. There's been organizations that have tried to do the entire street of Madison and haven't been extremely successful. We thought that three of us thought, Robbie Zettler and Rachel Anzelone, the three of us got together and said if we start small, maybe we can make this grow. And so we actually last year we had Candy Cane Lane, and it only went from Elmwood to Arthur, which was just 3 streets. And this year we expanded it from Warren to Hilliard. And if you go down Madison, right at the telephone pole in front of the First Third Bank, you'll see a big candy cane. And then there wasn't one across the street, so it's down a little bit near Walgreens. And then if you go down to Hilliard, you'll see one on each side. We have really done 3 different events, and each one I think has been very successful. I think the Candy Cane Lane was very successful last year. Of course, it's just like a group tonight, and I want to thank, the mayor and Drew and the councilman and certainly Ian for coming out and taking their time to come to a meeting. And you can see that there's probably a few thousand people between here and there, but there's a small group here. Well, that's what happens with any group you start. You start very small, usually 10% or less do the work. And that's what's happened, and we need more participation on Madison. We thought if we had Uptown Madison, there's Birdtown, and as I understand it, there is going to be another group starting with artists going from probably Arthur west. So if small groups start things and get things done in that area, then I think we're accomplishing what we want to do, is make Madison the place to come. You know, Detroit will always be the place to go, but we can build the same thing. And I think the architecture and the culture and everything on Madison has an awful lot to offer. So that's, the Uptown group is trying to do that. And if you, I think Friday night is our kind of kickoff night. Different businesses are doing different things. They're giving specials, and there's some music and Santa Claus and et cetera, et cetera. And we've definitely had support from the mayor's office to Drew to continue and try to build that area there in Uptown and show the people that, you know, we can do something. And what's really kind of uplifting is that in the last 3 days, we got 5 new members to Uptown. And one person, the day they moved in, I just happened to be there, and they joined. So if we can get more people and more people and more people in just that area, you'll see we'll do more things. And I suggest that if it's an organization in Birdtown that does the same thing, if you work together, we'll accomplish for Madison what we want to accomplish.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a kind of a general question that I'll start with you, Dave, and then anyone can chime in. Dave, you purchased a building on the west end of Madison, brought your business to Lakewood. Why Madison?
First off, just moving to Lakewood, is we lived in Lakewood for a long time, so moving the business into Lakewood made a lot of sense. When I first started my business as an architect, I felt like I needed to be downtown in order to be able to expand and have a big demographic for what I was working on. But the more as the business got a little bit older, I realized that I could have a chance to be wherever I wanted to be, and the opportunity to buy a building on the street. And Drew had mentioned that earlier. One of the things that's attractive about Madison is you can purchase buildings at a reasonable cost, and you can put some money in, and you can fix them up and do that. And that was one of the great things about Madison. And our property also had some parking on it, and that was a huge plus for me too. But the ability to buy a building, renovate it, and do that, and then in the end, I was downtown in one of the office buildings, and what I need to pay for my mortgage and everything is half of what I was paying in rent downtown. So it was a huge, just financially, what made an awful lot of sense to do it. And then for me, also looking at Madison and saying there's an investment, I really felt like that over time Madison was going to continue to develop up just like Detroit had done, and that putting money into there as an investment would have a return on it too. So selfish because I wanted to be close to my home, but just financially it made an awful lot of sense too because of the return I was going to get.
Excellent. Go ahead, Maria. You know you want to answer that.
What, you want to know why I bought in Birdtown?
Absolutely. Okay.
Well, I looked around at renting some storefronts for my practice, and I just didn't see anything that I liked. But when I went into the Lasky building, it was beautiful, it was well maintained, and it was affordable. And so I thought I would take a leap of faith and go for it. And I love Birdtown. I live half a mile from my office. The location's wonderful. I find that clients will come to you. You don't necessarily have to be downtown. I love the community, and when I have clients that come in and they want to know where to eat after our meeting, I try to send them to the Madison restaurants. So I really love it, and I've not regretted the decision, and I'm glad I did it.
Excellent. Excellent. Go ahead, Judy.
The Madison branch has been on Madison Avenue for 95 years. Originally, it was across the street where his garage is, where his garage doors is, at Mahall's. And then it moved down the street, and then the city bought the property. So the Madison branch has been on Madison Avenue for 95 years, and it's not going anywhere. The administration, years ago, there was talk and grumblings, but they kept us open. We're open. We're not open as much as Main Library on the weekend, but we're open. And the administration, the newest administration with Ms. James Crawford, has done little things that you probably don't notice, but I notice on the outside of the building. It's a great building. It's a solid building, and we're going to keep it going. So, and it's a fun place to be. The Madison Park, we had Friends of Madison Park years ago, and we worked really hard, and we put that playground there, and I'm telling you, that playground is busy every day, and I don't care what kind of weather it is. We got a number of people from the city, we got a number of people from Cleveland with school groups coming. It's a great park, it's a safe park, and it's just well run, and I have to say the administration, Mayor Summers, your group that runs that park, they are the best group. They're very helpful to me. They mow the grass and keep it so clean. I've been there, like I said, 24 years, so I knew it when it wasn't a very good park. And so it's just a nice place to work. So.
Thank you. Why Madison? Well, I think some of the other folks mentioned Madison Avenue is very affordable right now. I think with some of the things that the city is planning to do with some of the public infrastructure improvements, I think we're going to see an entirely different Madison Avenue in 5 years. I think the entire landscape is going to look a lot different. And I think we see opportunity there. I think where other people see some older buildings that maybe need some attention, I think a lot of folks see opportunity. And I think certainly Madison Avenue is more affordable than Detroit Avenue. So when you have people interested in starting a business, buying a building, Madison Avenue becomes much more attractive than Detroit Avenue is right now. And again, I think there's a lot of opportunity on Madison. I was thinking about a conversation I had with someone who owns a business on Madison Avenue, and a little bit west, and she said that she was planning on moving her business to Gordon Square. And the first thing I said was, well, that party's over. You know, Gordon Square, it's a good opportunity, but it's much more expensive. I think, Bob touched on this a little bit too, I think that if people sort of get together and form little clusters, we all do better. And so if Mahall's was off on its own little island and not near the library and not near the park and, you know, not near Taco Tano's and just sort of on its own little island, I think it would be a lot different. And I think that we have great neighbors, and I think that's really important to a business's success. And so I encourage her to try and find a business that might be more suitable to being kind of by herself where she's at now. And the idea is that, you know, we have some strength in numbers, and I think that we can attract some pretty unique businesses to Madison that maybe they can't afford Detroit Avenue. They're not interested in being, you know, neighbors with some of the folks there, but I think they can fit really well on Madison. So I guess opportunity is the answer.
Excellent, excellent. So while I think this is a great listening opportunity for everyone in the audience, it's also a listening opportunity for myself as a city employee and other city officials that are here today. And I kind of want to ask the question of, what are your biggest challenges on Madison? What are some of the things that you struggle to overcome? And it's something that perhaps the city can assist you with, or other property owners in Madison are experiencing the same thing. And like Bob said, you come together and possibly come up with a solution for those things. So whoever wants to start, but what are those challenges that you're facing? Can you use the mic, Bob?
I mean, one of the challenges is certainly a facelift on the buildings. And like as Ian has pointed out, he can give assistance in seeing what those buildings would look like with the facelift. And I think that's probably the first step. And then if you can get some of the owners of those buildings to invest some money for that facelift, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. We've got to make Madison Avenue look like Madison Avenue, and we can do it. But that's, I mean, I think that's one of the first challenges that,
Sure.
that we have to address.
Sure.
I'd probably answer that on an architectural side. We do a lot of work in small towns and historic preservation work, adaptive reuse work. And a lot of times when we see, and Drew was saying that some of the people have the apartments up above, they're making some money on their building. They don't, you know, the idea of investing some money on the ground floor to make it work isn't all that attractive. They're just because they don't want to put any money into it because they're already making okay. A lot of the buildings we go into in downtowns will go into, and the opposite true. They might have somebody in the retail on the ground floor, and none of the upstairs are actually used at all. None of the retail is there. There's no apartments up there. They're not using it for anything. And I think what challenges I just see just going down the street is there's so much untapped potential sitting in all those buildings right now. You know, a storefront that might need to be redone, a apartment upstairs that you know, a little bit of fixing up, and that they could change, the rent could change if they were to put a little bit of money into it. There's a whole other demographic of people in Lakewood right now that are willing to pay more money for apartments that are done well. You know, if you put an apartment on the market right now, you know, a house or whatever it is, that's halfway decent, you know, there's a bidding war really to try to get those right now. And when people can realize that there's some grant money out there, there's some abilities out there to work with the city to do that investment, that motivation to do it, just as you were saying there, you know, to go ahead and see what it would look like, what could it look like to do that. And when we looked at our building, we put a little second floor on top of our building as a conference room and an outdoor balcony. If we wouldn't have had the grant money was allowed us to do the storefront renovation of our building. That extra money actually allowed us to put our second floor on that we wouldn't have had if it wasn't for that. So there's a huge programs. There's a lot of money out there that is available if people are willing to put a little bit of effort into it. Untapped potential is huge along the street right now.
The question is,
Any challenges that you're facing?
challenges.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges, one of the things I hear is there's no parking on Madison Avenue. Well, I'm not sure that's really a concern. I think the problem is there's a perception that there's no parking on Madison Avenue. And somehow we've got to, that's the first thing that I thought of when you mentioned challenges is parking. I don't actually believe that it's a challenge. I just believe that people think that it's a problem. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it keeps people away, but it is something I hear a lot. Parking is a problem on Madison Avenue, and I just don't know that's the case.
Right.
I think there's also a perception of, because the branch is in Birdtown or close to Birdtown, I mean, there's the perception of the east end of Lakewood or the southeast end of Lakewood is not the safe place to be. Well, I beg to differ. I leave that building at 9 o'clock, and I don't feel unsafe at all as a older woman walking to my car, and I might have to walk down to the park to where my car is. So I think it's a perception that people have that, well, I'm not going to go to the branch, or I'm not going to go to Mahall's because it's in Birdtown, or it's up on Madison, or, you know, I think that's a perception that we have to get rid of, and I don't know, I think it's getting away from that, but there's a perception in this town. There's the east end of town and there's the west end of town, you know, and you're not going to make everybody happy, but I've had people, I had a man walk in the library this week and he'd never been in the branch. And I said, well, you're more than welcome to look around. I mean, when you're in the branch, you can stand there and look around and this is the branch, you know. It isn't like the main library on Detroit. So I think it's a perception that people have that we're the, you know, you don't want to go there. So we have to change that.
Yeah. Well, I think the city can assist in that. I mean, Colin, to your question or your point about parking, there's a number of municipal lots on Madison that we own, and it's parking available. If we could do better signage so that people can see, like, oh, this is a public parking lot, I can park here, that can alleviate that perception that there is no parking. So, I mean, there's definitely a role the city can play to help, you know, diminish those perceptions as well. Drew, could you come up here? We're going to, right. Drew, can you take the questions now? No. I'm going to open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions for Drew Siley or any of our panelists here, Sean will be walking around with a microphone.
Don't be shy. Perfect.
There you go.
This may be a question that could be out of ignorance as well, too. You were talking about the parking. I'm a business owner on Madison Avenue, and I'm from the Greek Village Grill. And I just have a question, like, in terms of, it doesn't happen, obviously, it's a seasonal thing with parking, in terms of we have street parking, which is great. I mean, there's definitely not a problem there, so I don't always complain. But in terms of the high school with football games and different events that happen, the high school has so much availability there, and not just my business. There's several businesses within Wascana, Bunce, Richland, that the city blocks off that entire Madison Avenue between those streets. And I think that there's other opportunities for these buses and other transportation that they use that they can park somewhere else. I mean, Bunce Avenue or Bunce Road is strictly residential, and why not block off the residents, which they have all driveways compared to the local businesses around there, that's all we have. Many of those businesses don't have parking lots, you know, or don't have, for example, Madison Park across the street, or other little parking lots with Beer Engine. I mean, that's a great luxury to have, but all we have is street park, and then all of a sudden you see these events that happen throughout the year, and there's nothing we can do. And there used to be a time where they would forget about them on Saturdays, so we'd lose parking on Saturdays as well. And for us small businesses, that's all we have, and that's what we depend on. It's a little difficult. I think that's where the city either, and they've done better this year because now they use disposable and they come across, but even still on Friday nights or Saturdays when they block those off, and I think they have so many more other options, whether it be on Franklin and the parking lots there or inside the parking lots on Bunce Road. And I've been a resident here, so I know all the streets 42 years. I've been in Lakewood my whole life. But there's so many other options, and you know, I know the side streets all are by residents, and if there's some kind of preparation for them to use their driveways or in garages and everything else, it definitely would help a lot of those smaller businesses that are just in that little area.
Sure. No, I think that's definitely something we can look into because, again, like you said, that's the only parking you have, and if that's taken away from you during certain periods of time, that's hurting your business, and we certainly don't want that because we want you to stay here for a lot longer than 42 years. So we'll work on that. Thank you,
Jason.
I know the mayor's taking notes too.
Yeah, just quickly on that. I think, you know, that's a very specific instance, but you touch on the larger issue of the parking management kind of situation during a special event, or how's it managed during the week. And I think the only way we're going to start developing creative solutions is to that kind of collaboration and coordination ethos, that if we're talking to each other, because you may have, and as you're talking about it, I can understand some of the things you're pointing out. I hear you on some of that stuff. But it's how do we bring in the adjacent business owners, the adjacent residents, who else has parking available, and how we start to figure out how to share and collaborate. That's our pathway to creative solutions to exactly what you're describing. That, you know, hopefully today is the beginning of even more discussion about these kinds of things with a larger group. But that's how we're going to make it go.
Part of the plan, there's many phases. Are you going to redo the lighting on Madison, the street lights? Is that part of it? Anybody that could field that would be great.
Are you talking about the street lights that illuminate the street?
That's correct. The street lights that illuminate the street. Yeah. I think I own a building at the very end, the western end, and I don't have a street light in front of my building. It's kind of dark, and I've got lights on the building, but I would love like those kind of cool, kitschy wrought iron lights all the way down. I don't know if that's part of it, and I realize the plan's already put together, but is that going to be part of it?
So the street lights that illuminate the street, right? As opposed to the useless ones that do nothing. So the traffic signal poles are going to be replaced. Those kind of traffic lights are replaced. The street's going to be redone. The street lights aren't part of this project. You know, there are certain blocks we've been able to achieve that with grant money on Detroit, but not right in the scope of the project as it is now.
You have any other questions from the audience? You got one in the back, Sean.
One thought to remember about Madison and Franklin is the Lakewood High School is going to be under construction for the next 2 years. So that's not going to make things easier as well. You know, the eastern half of the school is going to be demolished and rebuilt. So there are going to be 2,500 kids going to a school around a major construction site. So while we may have some longer-term solutions, I think we've got some agony and inconvenience and pain, though, that's ahead of us as well. And there'll be a fair amount of truck traffic, I think, moving down Madison to Lakewood High School, both to remove debris and ultimately to deliver material. So it's going to be a pretty busy place for the next 2 years, in addition to our portion. So we'll have to keep that in mind and work together to work through that.
So you had a question in the back corner, and one right there.
Hi, Drew. It's JT. I have a question for you about some of the vacant lots that are on Madison. So there's one over in by Birdtown and one closer toward Bunce Road. Those vacant lots, are they owned by the city?
Yeah. The one that's next to Firestone, for example, yeah, that's owned. The one that's at Newman and Madison, that's also owned by the city.
So part of the renovation, is there plans to bring development there, like, you know, would the city put a plan out there to build something for the city building, or is it going to be maybe potential retail or apartment living or anything like
For
that?
the lot that's adjacent to, for example, Firestone, we've had discussions with that owner about selling him that lot to be able to expand his business at that location, which is probably a better end use. For the lot of Newman, we're kind of reserving our options. We've talked about maybe that becomes public parking, you know, maybe there's a higher and better redevelopment use at this time. We have nothing in the pipe currently. Part of on the parking side, what we did, and Bob can talk about this a little bit, is we just finished a parking study in that Uptown district, and we're going to do that for most of the rest of Madison, or actually all of Madison, to understand, as Jason was talking about, where all the parking is, and is there enough demand at that end, at the Newman lot? That's the highest and best use for that lot. So that's something we're working on in 2014.
The other thing, sometimes people in my neighborhood complain about large vehicles coming down the street. So with all the construction that's happening, I'm assuming that you'll make sure that they won't go down side streets, that there's a specific route that they're on Bunce Road or on 117th, so they're not going into residential where it's creating noise pollution or possibly damaging the road, or, you know, these are large vehicles and debris and that sort of thing.
There's going to have to be a ton of coordination on managing those haul routes. Now, you know, most city streets, a truck under 6 tons can, you know, access those streets. So you're looking at FedEx trucks and, you know, but most of those kind of dump trucks is what you're talking about in semis. Those can't go down those residential streets unless we're in a situation where, as the mayor mentioned with the schools construction, for example, Roosevelt Elementary, which is going to be redone, is completely surrounded by residential streets. So we're going to have to figure out a haul route to manage that. Madison, we're going to try to minimize truck impacts. There may be certain instances where we have to go down a street in a limited capacity for a short amount of time because we don't have another option. But that's going to be part of our communication strategy to make sure those residents, if that has to happen, I'm hopeful it doesn't, understand how long, when, and all of that good stuff. So it's not a persistent issue, but a temporary situation.
The other question I have about the trees on Madison Avenue, a lot of people in Lakewood are very passionate about trees and creating shade and looking really nice. Are there plans to preserve some of those trees, or some that are possibly too big? Will you take out? You're going to add more trees for the scenery, that sort of thing?
So the council and the mayor put together a tree task force about a year ago that's looking at all these issues. I'm actually appearing in front of them on Monday to talk about exactly those kinds of things in commercial districts. So where do we have opportunities to add trees back? Where are trees not in an ideal situation? I think what you've seen a lot in Lakewood is, you know, 30 years ago, there was essentially a clinic on how not to plant street trees in so many areas. You see these honey locusts jammed into this tiny little tree well. They're heaving the sidewalk. You know, what are better options and where can we enhance that? That's always on our mind. We have an urban forestry budget to add back trees, so we're always going to be working on that.
Sean, we have one more question over here.
Appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Two-part question. The first part is, as you go through the Madison resurfacing, can you talk a little bit about how you're going to work around the middle schools, Harding, you know, with 2 kids or 1 kid, one going there shortly, Is that going to be taken care of during the summer when school's out? Or what have you guys done in terms of planning? And the second, to follow up on Mayor Summers' question, you guys are going to do this phenomenal job resurfacing Madison, and then they're going to tear down the high school and run some big construction trucks right over what we've just fixed. Can you talk a little bit about the abatement plans there to make sure that we don't mess up what we've just spent a lot of money and fixed?
Sure,
Thanks.
and those are both good questions, and it's very much top of mind how we're going to coordinate that, because we don't want to damage what we've just done, and there's certainly sensitivity around the schools protecting those areas. We're not there yet on that schedule, and I think that's what those workshops, we're going to come back out to the community in January and February. We'll have a lot more specificity about those kinds of things, where we can actually lay out the maps we have, roll up our sleeves, answer questions about schedule and method and those kinds of issues. And then also hear from folks things we may not have anticipated. You know, how do we deal with that? And that's why we're coming out early. So we'll be back to you with a better answer.
Before I thank the panelists, I want to do a shameless plug. One of my responsibilities at the city is to manage a storefront renovation program that we've heard about a number of times this evening. And so I just want to let you know that I'm a resource to help you apply for those funds. Like Drew said, it's 40% of the work, up to $30,000. There's also a loan as well, a component that you can get up to $50,000 to do repairs on your property. So I'm here for you to help make those plans, connect you with Ian at LakewoodAlive to do that design conceptual stage to see what this can really look like, and then we can connect you with the funds to make that happen. And then secondly, Madison's unique with its first floor retail and then residential's upstairs. And fortunately, we're a community block grant entitlement community, so we get some funds that can help us do housing as well. Our program manager, Mary Lee, has a great program called the Home Program, so we could actually combine these things to provide funding for the apartments upstairs and the retail downstairs to really help bring back the buildings on Madison, one of the challenges that Bob identified. So I have my business card. I can talk with you after the session here tonight, and we can really make some great things happen on Madison if we work together. Go ahead, Drew.
Jason, one more shameless plug on that kind of thing. First of all, let's give a round of applause to our panel. These are great folks. You know, on the business front here, I've had a chance to work with every one of these folks in a different capacity and gotten to know them, and they are certainly very good ambassadors and just good people who have done a lot of important work on Madison. But I would encourage anyone who's interested in opening a business, looking to do anything with their existing business, a good resource is folks like this. Reach out to others. If you need an introduction, if you want us to make a connection, that's one of our best roles, is to be a conduit, to be connective on those kinds of things. So talk to each other, help understand their path. There's a lot of the scabs they have from doing what they've done have been hard earned. Their counsel will be extremely valuable to you in many ways if you think so, and vice versa. You know, we can connect these guys to you if there's opportunity, but that conversation, that collaboration is going to make all the difference. So thank you for being here. Thanks again to our panel, and we're going to be around to answer any questions you have. So have a good evening.